Hi Daz. I'd just like to just add some detail to the Brexit video that you posted a couple of days ago. And while I absolutely get your sentiment, um, there's a few assumptions there, and I noticed in the comments that people are telling you you're making assumptions, but they're not telling you what those assumptions are. And so, to the best of my knowledge, I'm going to try and sort of fill you in, and specifically just the points you raised. The first thing is the UK or England, as it probably will eventually become, or England and Wales, as it is very likely that Scotland and Northern Ireland, which is a separate country in as far as it has its own localised parliament, but it is part of the United Kingdom. So it may well accede from the United Kingdom, as well might Scotland. So England and Wales, their isolationism is entirely the wrong word from where I'm sat. The days where goods and information and people needed to travel around the world in steam engines and there was no transport have long gone. There is no isolationism thing here at all. There is no risk of isolation. As far as Europe goes itself, the idea that Europe is a gateway to the world, a trading gateway to the world, is entirely and completely wrong. Europe is very much a closed shop, a very incestuous shop that likes to primarily trade with itself. It only looks to expand when it feels threatened. And as you quite rightly said, if you see my mouse pointer, there is the question of Turkey, as there is always the question of Turkey. There's been a question of Turkey in Western politics probably for the last 400 years, hasn't there? But since the fall of the Ottoman Empire anyway. But we've got the question of Turkey, and that is twofold, and I think you've identified those two reasons. The possible threat of IS incursion from the south, and I'm not sure whether you did mention actually the idea that an emboldened Putin may want to come through and at least influence Turkey. I doubt if he'd have the audacity to invade Turkey, but he may want to influence it. He may want to have military bases there at some point, particularly on the eastern border. So Turkey's being included in talks as because they see it as a threat, a border threat. In recent years, the EU has included some new countries. We've had quite a few new places join. The former Yugoslavia and the former Czechoslovakian play Croatia, Serbia, etc. They've joined, but with Greece, and we've also had some really big issues with some of these countries that have joined. In the 1990s and the early 2000s, our Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, a guy called Gordon Brown, who's not particularly revered, he won't go down in history, probably, banged on about the 6 fiscal measures that anyone wishing to join the EU should meet before they could be considered for membership. And when the EU decided to disregard those 6 fiscal measures, which I may add were their own 6 fiscal measures, he declined to offer the UK as member of the single currency, the euro. One of those fiscal measures, the one which has come back to haunt the rest of Europe, the EU, is the relationship which should exist from any member joining between their gross domestic product and their national debt. There should be a relationship that the annual GDP of a country should be in some way related to the national debt in a way that makes it look as if it is repayable within a reasonable amount of time. What we've had is countries basically cook the books to join, and then only when the auditors have gone in bizarrely after the event and found out that the books are wildly wrong, and that the level of debt was many-fold more than was previously admitted. This has caused a great deal of concern because all these countries here share the same. Switzerland doesn't, Norway doesn't, and a couple of others doesn't, but nearly every country in this that I'm circling here shares the same currency. So the debt burden is shared. When Portugal and Greece suddenly had a lot of debt discovered, the value of the currency in everybody's pocket here went down. And you probably haven't heard much about it in the last few years, but that debt hasn't gone away. In fact, it's still being defaulted on to a huge extent today. and the illegal, and they were illegal loans given to those countries. They were illegal only, I suppose, nobody's going to get sue anybody over it. It's one of those technically illegal things, are still being boosted, and interest rates are still being offset. So we have a Europe that is not an open door to the rest of the world. It is in fact a very incestuous closed shop system that has levies and embargoes and tariffs on anything from outside Europe coming in, very restrictive trade practices on anything from outside Europe, and it subsidises huge trade benefits for trading within Europe at the cost to the populace. We have food mountains that are wasted, where farmers, not just farmers, I mean fisheries and whatever, fisheries are fished to death, farmer fields are ground into the ground, and then the crops thrown away. While that is inevitable to some extent, and always has been, because you never know what every year is going to be like, there's a seasonality involved there, of course, it's now almost planned to make sure there's always a surplus so the price can be kept artificially low. However, the farmers are paid huge subsidies for that, and in a scene rather reminiscent of Grapes of Wrath, you will go past you'll just go past towns full of hungry people in the northeast of England, straight onto farms where crops are being burnt. That is something that is alive and in the UK today. It's not something we like to talk about, but it happens. So the third thing, and the thing that personally was my reason for not for voting leave, given the opportunity, which I would never expected anybody would give us, was the lack of democracy. The EU is an entirely undemocratic situation. It has two principles to manage its executive. It has the European Parliament, and we elect MEPs, members of the European Parliament, to that, and it has the it has a system of committees and European commissioners who set directives. The European commissioners are politically appointed, and typically they are, in the case of one of the first European commissioners the UK had, Mr. Neil Kinnock, he was appointed after failing to become British Prime Minister in the early 90s. Actually, he wasn't one of the first, but he's the one that everybody seems to remember, but I'll come to that in a moment. So we have this situation. Now, if the situation was that the elected representatives, the MEPs, were those with the main executive power that was merely ratified or discussed at commissioner level, that would be okay. But it's the other way round. The power is nearly all with the unelected and politically appointed commissioners. They're the ones that make the rules. They're the ones that decide what goes through. The MEPs are the people that provide the committee members, do the chatting. There is a doomsday option they have to totally dissolve the commission, and they almost did it once before the commission resigned, but that is a doomsday option. That is the whole of Europe goes into meltdown if that happens option. That's not something that would happen. So it only almost happened once, and it's almost unthinkable that it ever would, and unlikely to happen. It's a bit like the Queen of the United Kingdom refusing to sign a law into Parliament, which is just supposed to be rubber stamped by her, but she can effectively still, I believe, refuse to sign a white paper when it's put in front of her. So it's undemocratic. Now, to my mind, that's the only thing that matters. As soon as you have that lack of freedom, because for me, democracy and freedom are almost synonyms. As soon as you have a system where democracy and freedom are not the axioms of the way in which everything is run, that system is entirely against every bone in my body and every beat of my heart. I cannot accept that at all. And given the opportunity to get out, I would take it 100 times. However, I can see that some people would mitigate that, particularly the young people today. Despite the recent austere times, the young people today have probably never had it so good, and it's a fantastic opportunities that they have to learn and work throughout the whole 27 countries of Europe, which they're now worried will be denied them, and all that's completely understandable, and they are very, very good reasons to want to stay. And there are other very good reasons as well, such as the immediate short-term and mid-term stability. However, what aren't good reasons to want to stay is the idea that England's going to be isolationist. That doesn't even mean anything logically. What still exists, let me tell you what still exists. The UN obviously still exists, NATO still exists. The G8 and the all the G functions still exist, because actually about 3 or 4 of them, not just the G8. Other things that still exist as a single European trading bloc, of which the United Kingdom would probably very much still be a part of after these negotiations. What they won't be a part of is the political unity of the rest of Europe. Now, when we're on to political, that's the last thing. Europe is not unified politically, regardless of the fact there is the EU. It is anything but. And we like to browbeat ourselves in the UK and consider ourselves the naughty boys and apologise a lot and go sort of doffing our cap in our hand, apologising for upsetting the rest of Europe. Oh my goodness, how self-effacing that is when you compare the ultra right-wing, anti-European, anti-globalisation sentiments in the rest of Europe. We are pussycats compared to those. The Le Pen's French National Party is one. There are 2 parties now in Germany who are just so right-wing it's unbelievable, despite the laws banning things like Nazi propaganda. The Netherlands, the general feeling from the Netherlands is if they had the vote tomorrow to get out of Europe, they'd probably win at 65% and be out by the end of next week, and as soon as they possibly could. The rest of Europe is in no way joined, and it is a little bit, I think it's down to culture. The idea of joining together culturally is a great idea. The idea of joining together economically is a great idea, but the economic side of that is much easier to do in many respects. Joining together in that sense is easy to do, but the cultural side is really very, very difficult. I'm not sure where you come from, Daz. By your accent, I'm sort of guessing you're perhaps an Aussie. But Europe, it is so varied in terms of climate, in terms of beliefs, in terms of religion, in terms of historical politics, in terms of everything. And it may well be that in some point in the next generation or two, it could come together in a way which is harmonious and everybody would agree with. But what's happening now, the EU is forcing it at a pace. It's taking a view in the minutiae of people's lives. The quality of your tap water, the way your bread's made, the way you should teach in schools, the way your transport should run, all sorts of things that we never signed up for. Now, this is true. We signed up for something called the common market, which was, as the name suggests, a common market. What we didn't sign up for, and which is being widely rejected, and not most by the UK by any stretch of the imagination, is the Big Brother style government, which is coming out from these unelected and unremovable European commissioners in an entirely undemocratic fashion. It's not one-sided for all of that. When it came to my own personal feelings before I voted, I was certainly not an automatic leave. I wavered both ways, but in the end, as I mentioned about 10 minutes ago, my thoughts about democracy sort of trumped everything else. You just can't live in a non-democratic society with it's basically an oligarchy is what it is, and that's just not acceptable. If that one aspect had changed, and a few years ago there was the opportunity to change that, and it was David Cameron, our Prime Minister, the guy that just resigned, the guy who foolishly called this referendum, and he is, despite the fact I'm on the winning side of it, the guy was an idiot for calling a referendum. It was cowardly. It was to save his own political career within his own party and to win him the election in 2015. It was a populist, stupid thing he did, and now he's run away from the results of it. He's a coward. But for all of that, I'm still glad I voted for leave. But if they just managed to change that one thing 3 years ago and totally reform the lawmaking system, then I probably would have voted for Remain. Because that is easily the key message for me, that you have to have democracy. I'm sorry, there is no other excuse for that. What we've been told in the UK during the 8 weeks of this campaign leading up to the referendum is that if we stay in Europe, we can reform it. Well, we've been in Europe now 43 years, and we keep being told, we keep telling them we want less bureaucracy and more transparency, and every year I can promise you we get more bureaucracy and less transparency. Yes, there are benefits, but the benefits have got nothing to do with isolationism, Daz. That's a bizarre thing you say. I've no idea. I'm not even quite sure what you mean. there is no threat. There is no, the idea that we wouldn't be a full part of Europe in everything other than politics is a nonsense. We would be a full trading partner with Europe still, would be a full military partner with Europe, at least as far as the UN and NATO are concerned. And in terms of all the other cultural events which are gradually bonding us together in the right way, in terms of the sport and the music and all the rest of it, the ways that which we should bond together first, those are what should lead us towards a more united Europe. Arts and culture should lead us into a more united Europe, and they should lead. What you can't do is join different cultures and then expect them just to knit together after you've joined them by force. That doesn't work, and it will not work anywhere, and it probably will not work amongst all these as well. There's all sorts of things you probably know about the German relationship with Turkey dating back to World War One and Kemal Ataturk and all that kind of stuff, and the problems with Poland and the East and the West and the divisions of Poland and the Yugoslavian issue and the Czechoslovakian issue and good grief, and the Basque area. It's just endless. Europe is just a place with lots of divisions. But the way it will come together is under its own steam of joining in its culture, playing sport with each other, music, travel, letting our young people still intermingle, but a forced political union at a time where it is jarring for the populations of each country. And it's not the most jarring for the United Kingdom, I've said several times. It's more jarring for France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands. Those places either have extreme right-wing parties who are very close to power. Le Pen is inching close. I think as of today, Le Pen is the most popular politician in France. She's basically a Nazi. If there was an election in France today, they would put in a party that would make Hitler's National Democratic Party look soft by comparison, and they would succeed from Europe by the end of next week. That won't happen. There is not going to be an election in France today, but if there was, that's what would happen. And they are incredibly keen to get out of Europe in a much bigger way than the United Kingdom were, and so are Germany in many respects. And as for the likes of Spain and Italy, my goodness, the Netherlands, in a much more peaceful way, just want to leave. And they're one of the three original countries, Benelux, Belgium, Netherlands and Luxembourg. They're one of the three original European founders, and they're the keenest of the lot, although they don't have the ultra right-wing impetus that France and Germany have. So Europe, the best the EU ever was papering over some massive divisions and actually creating larger divisions through the resentment of their oligarchy power structure, which was being resented across Europe. And I say for the third time, the United Kingdom was by no means the entity which disliked that the most. We were probably fifth or sixth in line, but we had the opportunity first. Our stupid Prime Minister, soon to be ex-Prime Minister, cowardly, gave us for his own political future, gave us a referendum, and we took the opportunity. But had the referendum taken place in several of these other countries, they'd have gone. As far as small countries making a lot of money, speak to Norway up here, speak to Switzerland here, speak to plenty of the other small countries around here that are doing very, very well. Some of the wealthiest countries in Western Europe, but are not in the EU. They're respected. They take part in everything that's going on in Europe, including the military the joint military directives under the UN and NATO. They're fantastic. We're all inclusionists. Now, as the UK, we can go out and we can trade with India, we can trade with China, which is going to do China a lot of good in the long run. They've learned a lot since 1993, since the handing back over of Hong Kong. They've realised the benefit of transparency, because per acre, I think Hong Kong earned something like, the figure I think it's like 4,000 times more per acre revenue than any other acre in China. And I think they realised that was quite a good by the back door, by using capitalism, which maybe isn't ideal, but they realised that this democracy and transparency and openness was just a way to be a much wealthier country. As far as India goes, fantastic, and we'd love to trade more closely with India. We still play a hell of a lot of sport with India. Our connections with them are still very good, despite the partition issues, which were shameful, but we're now in that situation where we've got a fantastic relationship with India, fantastic opportunities with China. We'd love to be trading more with South America, but we can't, because despite this idea that Europe is the big open market, it is anything but an open market. It's a closed, insular, incestuous, highly regulated, highly bureaucratic, cost ineffective market. As I say, it's a closed market. Europe does not like any of its entities trading outside its barriers. It's dead against it. The UK can now begin ideas to trade with whoever they want, and I don't get my news from social media. I'm on Bloomberg and places like that. I know that as of today, the UK has been approached by so many different major investors from outside of Europe just in the first day. We'll be fine, and if Scotland wants to go separate, they'll be absolutely fine as well. They've got Brent oil, they'll be absolutely fine. And it could be the very, very best thing to ever happen to Ireland. My goodness, a backdoor way to get a united Ireland. There is no expansionist policies with England. We're not interested in owning Northern Ireland or Scotland. Nobody is. It'd be fantastic. They could be our friends and neighbours right next to us. Brilliant. And as far as Ireland goes, the more I think about that, if there is a peaceful reuniting of Ireland, where because of this referendum, what a fantastic win that is. None of what I've said, and especially not that last part, I will be plain sailing, and none of it may, lots of it may not happen. But the opportunities are there now, and the opportunities outside Europe are far better than the opportunities, in my mind, inside Europe, for the reasons I spent the last 21 and a half minutes outlining. So thanks, Daz. I mean, I get your points. I don't think you're wrong to make the points, but you'd need to understand the other side from somebody who lives in the UK, who deals with what happens here. And while I was more or less ambivalent about leaving for weeks, in the end, a democracy is it. And picture yourself that. Here's a question for you, actually. If next time you come across a British citizen, ask them who their UK commissioner to the EU is. Bear in mind, he's probably the most powerful person in the United Kingdom. He's probably more powerful than the Prime Minister. And I bet you not one person in the United Kingdom could name him. And I bet if you went to most of these other countries here and asked them who their EU commissioner was, I bet most of them could not name them. And the reason for that, and some of them, it's pro rata, so some have more than one. And the reason for that is because they're faceless. They are literally faceless, unappointed, politically motivated, oligarchic bureaucrats who impose laws. They say benignly, that's great. You can take a benign law for as long as you like, until the day it's not a benign law anymore. And then there's sod all you can do about it. Just like the Fey rabbits in Watership Down, if you've ever read that, all the fat rabbits they come across, oh yeah, it's great here, and the farmers actually just breeding them up and killing them now and again. Or the Eloi and the Morlocks in H.G. Wells' War of the World. You've got the Eloi, and they're sitting around eating grapes all day and getting fat and thinking this is lovely, but they have no control over their own life. And when the bell rings, they queue up to get eaten by the Morlocks. That's just that is okay. That's very dramatic, and that's not, we're not going to get eaten, but you can't rely on unappointed, undemocratically appointed leaders to always remain benign. History is full of examples where that's turned to SHIT very quickly, and I can't think of very many examples in history where it hasn't turned to SHIT at some point. Okay, they're fine now, but at some point, when some other crisis, external or internal, happens, there's every opportunity for that totally undemocratic and unaccountable system to turn very, very nasty, and there'd be absolutely sweet sod all we could do about it. It's not acceptable, and it's certainly not a system when I have the opportunity to not live undemocratically, I take it. Anyway, thanks for your input, Daz. I stupidly unsubscribed from you for about 20 minutes yesterday, then I subscribed again. Your videos are great, and in a way I'm actually really sort of thankful for you just for caring enough and taking the time to do what you did do. That's great. And as with most things politics, and particularly where there's emotion involved, there is no objectively right thing here, but the balance of subjectivity from where I'm sat leave was the right thing to do, and I will stand by that. Thanks, Daz.